8.
Hello and welcome to this session on communicating and building confidence. I'm Ian Taylor from Travel Weekly, and I'm joined today by Dr. Taleb Rifai, former Secretary General of the UN World Tourism Organization and co-chair of the Global Travel and Tourism Resilience Council and Crisis Management Center. With us also is Gerald Lawless, International Ambassador for the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, former chairman of the WTTC and honorary president of Jumeirah Hotels. I'm joined also by Haitham Mattar, senior advisor to the Saudi Ministry of Tourism and former chief executive of Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority. And with us too is Bernard Dunn. Yes, Bernard, you are there. I thought I'd lost you for a second. Bernard Dunn, president of Boeing Corporation in the Middle East and North Africa. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. What would you say is the key priority or priorities for communicating and building confidence as travel comes out of this crisis and restarts? Taleb.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ian. It's lovely to be here with all of you. I think that building confidence and trust is very, very important. There is a great amount of fear and disconnect and anxiety in the hearts and minds of people that has been living there for a while now. We need to make sure that that is not there anymore. Because even if governments decide now to lift the travel ban, people are not going to travel just like that. They're not going to leave their homes unless it's necessary, absolutely necessary and important. So how do we do that? We do that by trust and confidence. Transparency is very important. We have to come across as very honest. People have to believe that we're doing the right thing. Nobody can guarantee anything at all. When we used to fly aeroplanes, we knew that aeroplanes were not 100% safe, but we knew that the aircrafts and everybody's doing their best to keep us safe. That's exactly the kind of feeling that we need to entrust now. It's the feeling of confidence, the feeling that we're doing our best to help you. That's what I can say now. Stop at this point and then we can pick up again. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll come back maybe to how we build that confidence. Gerald, sure. What would you say is the priority? We haven't, you're on mute, Gerald.
You're on mute.
Yeah, you warned me and here I am, I forgot it. Sorry, let me just start by saying that actually I'm not the honorary president of the Jumeirah Group. I'm the former president and CEO, just so that we keep it correct. Thank you very much, Ian. But I would say that building on Taleb's point, we very much have a situation where we got to see where we can genuinely remove anxiety from the potential traveller. And there are many aspects of that. And one of the areas that I feel is not really being addressed sufficiently is the whole issue of what happens if there's a cancellation? How can I be sure that I will get a refund? And there the industry, I think, has to come in very strongly in trying to reassure the potential traveller that in the event of, say, a resurgence of the coronavirus, a new lockdown, whatever, that we can do something about getting refunds. I've given recently some examples, but particularly the government in Ireland came out with, I thought was a very good initiative, saying that in the event that the tour operator travel agent does not have the means to actually honour a refund, the government, once it's been convinced that that is actually the case, they will then come in and offer the refund. And I think this is what the travel industry needs to be agreeing with respective governments in different countries around the world, that we give the confidence to the traveller that they should be able to get their money back in the event of something beyond their control and then beyond the means of the tour operator or travel agent to actually repay them. I think it's something well worthwhile, and I thought the Irish government's example was a very good one.
So you want to see government stand behind that refunds guarantee?
I want to see coordination between the industry and governments to say, look, there will be areas, there will be times when the tour operator or the travel agent or the provider is not in a position to, or the airline or the hotel, to be in a position to give a refund. Can you please then step in? But obviously we have to be able to prove to you that we actually cannot repay. I think from that point of view, we'll give a lot of confidence to the traveling public. And this is one of the areas that I would say should be a priority.
Okay, thank you. Hytham, what would you prioritize? If you'll have to unmute, Hytham.
All right. Just to really build on what Dr. Taleb said and what Gerald also has highlighted, I think all people are affected differently with a crisis and information, and people react and process information differently. So I think the key priorities here, as we discussed before, is really transparency. So being transparent with whether we are a brand or a destination, speaking to consumers, is being transparent, and also the commitment. We talked about how important it is for people to travel again, to feel safe and secure. So each brand or each destination's priority is to showcase its efforts to keep their commitment to ensure safety and security of people throughout the whole travel touchpoints. I think this is really critical. And a key priority. I think all governments have done a great job initially in communicating stimulus plans, and now it is time to go to action.
Okay, thank you. Bernard, I'd want to hear what you think is the priority, but I know that Boeing is also working on this confident travel initiative. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Ian, and it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. About 2 weeks ago, Boeing launched a confident travel initiative. And this is a desire to basically address every question that you guys just posed a little while ago. There's a recognition that we are going to have to lead the consumers back into flight on commercial airplanes, which then touches every other aspect of the travel industry, airports, hotels, you name it. And there are lots of questions to be addressed. And so our initiative is an effort to pull together in a coordinating role governments, airlines, international organizations, airports, and basically all the people necessary in a seamless fashion to discuss these matters and come up with consensus and an industry-wide set of standards for what we all need to do to encourage the flying public to get back on our airplanes, fly to our airports, get out of those airports and safely move to whatever their destination is. It's a seamless, industry-wide effort that touches all the players. And we've launched that about 2 weeks ago. We've had quite a few conversations already with key regulators and government officials, as well as airlines. And it's an ongoing effort with no particular milestones in mind, other than to help everybody with our mutual desire to get this industry back up on its feet.
And what is the timeline, would you say then? For example, in Europe, the European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, has already launched 2 weeks ago health and safety protocols for airports, airlines. So presumably the ideal would be if what you're working on is very similar, if not identical, to what EASA has already proposed.
Sure. And it's not just about the United States, our initiative. It's worldwide. It's global. And EASA's work is good. We've seen that. And it could be a template for what we do around the world. But what's necessary is actually to pull everybody together and coordinate it globally. And we feel that we're in a position to be able to do that. And so that's what this initiative is all about.
And it's easy to see how in 12 months' time there could be a global system of protocols and so on, similar to what we've seen in the security screening at airports and so on in response to the terror attacks. But in the meantime, surely there's going to be an element of a piecemeal resumption. Some countries are open, others aren't, and so on. So it's going to be more difficult to get international agreement in the short term, isn't it?
It is, and this is something that we all work on, daily and together. as you mentioned, if you go back to what happened after 9/11, what gave people confidence that they could fly again was a set of standards that would apply in every single airport around the world. For example, what the security screening is going to be. And once you understand what the new protocol is, you feel confident to be able to get on an airplane. Well, we need the same thing now, except it's not about terrorism. It's about a pandemic. And I doubt that there will be a seamless rollout across the entire world, but we're making an effort to coordinate that because we do need a global standard for this. Just like we created after 9/11 with security, we need that similar global standard now for how to operate in a viral pandemic situation.
Okay, thank you. Taleb, there are two key groups of people who have to be confident and reassured, and those the customers, obviously, the traveling public, but also those working in travel and tourism. Are there any differences in the reassurance the industry and governments need to provide to those two groups, or do they completely overlap? And
No.
if there's a difference, what needs to be done?
Okay, these two groups are very essential because without having the people that work in the tourism industry, in the aviation industry, confident about what they're doing, they themselves could be in the risk of being contaminated. So they have to be confident themselves to convey the confidence. Now, the confidence, the main objective is to communicate confidence to the consumer, but that cannot happen without the people working there. I want to say something with regard to the risks that we're taking now. Now, this is much more serious than anything that we've seen before, because it talks about something we don't see, a risk of something that is not as visible. Even terrorism, even September 11, was not as serious as this one. Because this one, you need to communicate confidence in everything you touch. When you approach people, when you talk even to a friend, you don't know who's your friend and who's your enemy here. So you have to be very, very careful about it. And if I may say something with regard to what Gerald said, I think what Gerald said is very, very important with regard to refunds. The most important thing, Gerald, is the life, is the health. That's more important than your pocket now. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we communicate confidence, that when people go on an aeroplane, they know that if something goes wrong, somebody's going to take care of them. Now, of course, it's important to get a refund if you don't travel. And I think insurance companies must play a big role in this. I think what the Irish government has done, it's very good. But I think insurance companies should play a role in this. I have another suggestion with regard to how to convey confidence and communicate, which is certification. People need to see something, a piece of paper that says that these protocols are being implemented by this part. When they enter a hotel, when they enter an aircraft, when they enter an airport, you must see a certificate that says that I certify that these people are practicing these protocols. It's very, very important from a body, an international body or a government, some agency that people trust, some entity that people trust. It's very important. I think we're underestimating how big the gap is now between confidence and people. People are very, very scared. It's their life, it's their health. Health is a very, very serious risk. It's not like any other risk at all. There is no chances you can take here. Thank you.
Well, I want to come in on those two points with others, and Gerald, to give you the opportunity to respond. But Taleb, you've said previously there's no day after with COVID-19. This is something we have to live with. Do you think that all businesses in the sector understand that?
Not yet, but it's a fact. It's a fact. Like September 11, I still remember the days where we used to take off from our cars, walk to the airplane, and just get on the plane. No metal detectors, no taking off your shoes, no taking off your belt, no liquids, no nothing. Today, it's become a fact of life. Now, this is not going to disappear now. I think the masks and the gloves, for example, and the social distancing, or being careful in approaching people, will become a way of life, whether we like it or not. That's what I believe in. I don't think industry is recognizing this yet in its totality, but we have to take that seriously. We have to do it right now, because without adopting some protocols and convincing people, it's not just what we do, it's how we communicate what we're doing that's more important even than what we do. People have to believe that we're doing the right thing. Otherwise, it doesn't matter anymore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gerald, I'm sure you want to respond to that, but also I wonder what you think about the certification, recognition of the protocols and so on.
Yeah. Well, I'll address that first. I think that recently, or just last week, my previous company, Jumeirah Hotel Group, actually issued a press release how they've engaged Bureau Veritas. And Bureau Veritas have their own certification process specifically designed for this current crisis called Safety. So it's, I think it's a great idea and it's a great thing to do, especially with an organization, say, like Bureau Veritas, where there would be a lot of confidence from the public that this is an independent audit. I know that in the past we've used them in Jumeirah for the ISO certification. And I think this is a really good way forward and does give it puts in place a very strong discipline within a hotel, exactly how they can keep the employees safe, how they can keep the guests safe, and how all the protocols that they actually are addressing and implementing are those that have been independently verified and independently specified. But I think that's really good and very, very helpful. I have a lot of mixed feelings about what Taleb says in relation to how things will be immediately going forward, because if we continue pretty well exactly as we are, we're not going to have very much travel. I'd love to ask Bernard, are you going to redesign the interior of your Boeing aircraft to cope with a much lower volume of traffic within the actual aircraft? What is going to happen there? And then we see the issue of, for example, the sports events starting again. Are we never going to have a football match until we find a vaccine? Apart from the way they're trying to do it from the 17th of June in the UK, well, it's not so sure. And then we see what's happening, for example, with the protests in the United States at the moment. People are totally ignoring the instructions and the protocols that are already in place because there is a pent-up frustration. We've seen the beachfronts throughout Europe, throughout the UK, absolutely jam-packed with people ignoring protocols. So it's something that interests me a lot. Is it just going to be thrown out the door or thrown out the window because people don't want to do it anymore, and they're so frustrated and they say, "Okay, I'm going to take the risk," or not? And I think it's something that is very difficult to really for any of us to understand how the future is going to move within the very short-term future. Okay, longer term, when you get into vaccines and everything, one can see how, like Sir Tim Clark said in the last interview, that he's looking at 2023, 2024, before we can actually feel that we're getting back to where we would like to be and where we would aspire to be with regards to volume of traffic. So that's, thanks for giving me the opportunity there, but it's something's more a question than an answer. I really don't know where it's going.
It's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because there is an urgency to restart from an economic point of view, but also because of a degree of frustration potentially building up, and then whether people will ignore the health restrictions that are necessary. Haitham, can I come to you? I'm interested to know how what you think about this, but also about what you think destinations should be doing. I mean, obviously you're advising Saudi Arabia, you headed another tourism development authority previously. What should destinations be doing? And presumably there's a difference depending on the level of COVID infection and so on in the destination and the relative importance of travel and tourism maybe.
Great. Well, Ian, first I want to address your very important question that you asked earlier about the employees of the industry and what's happening with those. And I think it's really critical that we address this very important topic. As we also, we've heard a huge number of job losses across the globe. However, we must also recognize the efforts that were made by some of the hotels and hotel owners and hotel operators to retain employees, whether through a reduction on pay or a reduction on packages. But there is a huge amount of effort to retain employees. Now, also, we must reassure employees of the industry that this is an industry that always gets right back up on its feet, right? We are on our knees today, but we will get back up. The pandemic, as Dr. Taleb rightly said, I always say the pandemic, COVID is here to stay. It will not go away for a long time. If it does anyway, We just need to learn how to manage it. And managing COVID becomes part of the viral ecosystem that we have today. Economically, as we see ease of lockdowns and as we see what they call travel bubbles or travel corridors improve, we started to see Emirates launching flights to various destinations and recently announced across 9 destinations in the Middle East. This will start to restart, obviously, the economy. Hotel employees will be required again to come back and reopen hotels. Some hotels that are closed today will come back for demand when demand is coming, and it might be in the next 6 to 12 months or 18 months, but it will come back. So I think the cost of rehiring people is much more expensive than retaining people. The cost of reopening a hotel is much more expensive than closing a hotel. And I think those who made a subconscious decision to keep their hotels running by reducing their costs and cutting pay, but retaining their employees was a very wise and smart decision. Although we also understand the challenges that some other hotel owners may have in keeping their employees or retaining their employees or keeping their hotels open. To the second part of your question about what should destinations be doing, and I think there's a number of activities that was done before about the fantasy of travel again. We've seen videos that showed empathy and fantasy, great videos from countries like Greece, Portugal, to name a few. But it is now time to action. And I think one of the great videos I've seen was from the Faroe Island, who started to show action. So it moved from empathy, fantasy to action. So come visit. Although it is a virtual visit, but it's actually a come visit. And today, consumers or travelers want to book. We've seen data, live data from the likes of Amadeus. We've seen data from Google search trends. And we can see that consumers are booking for July until March next year. Small numbers, but people are reacting and they're booking. They're booking destinations where they see flights are open. They're booking destinations where they see of course, COVID is controlled, but also the recent studies I have seen results of, 81% of people want to travel. They want to get out. 51% say they would travel provided they feel safe in their country and they feel safe in the country that they are going to. So that's a great opportunity for destinations, to start not only acting on delivering the safety protocols and what I call now no more social distancing. It's called physical distancing. We still need to socialize. This is part of our DNA as human beings. We need to socialize. We need to communicate. So I think it's physical distancing rather than we keep calling it social distancing, right? Also, we need to understand what governments are doing to implement rigorously those protocols of physical distancing, sanitization, cleanliness. Another study we looked at recently showed that 53 of visitors were totally unhappy with the cleanliness of hotels pre-COVID. This is way before COVID even came. So people were still unhappy with the cleanliness levels of hotels. This is an opportunity for hotels to up the game on cleaning, up the game on hygiene, and how are they going to differentiate their brands? We've seen Hilton come out with a clean stay. We've seen IHG come out with clean promise. How is this going to be a brand differentiator? Is it just that I've signed with Lysol or Clorox, or how does a consumer really get this? So destinations must have a plan, must have a recovery strategy, must look at the source markets that have recovered today and have opened up their airports and airlines, and must start negotiations with the OTAs and travel agents to activate co-partnership deals, co-marketing deals, and start really speaking to consumers who are ready to travel.
Okay, I just want to pick up on one. Well, I want to pick up on a lot of things you said, but on one thing now, you said now's the time to move to action, call to action. Only the UNWTO put out a release this morning saying only 3% of destinations have started to relax their travel restrictions. That would suggest to me that it's a little early to say, come now. Clearly, what destinations and travel businesses need is an indication from governments when they'll be able to reopen. And that would aid confidence in booking and thinking about going away, wouldn't it? But you're saying you should start thinking about putting out these messages, time to go now.
So let's take this a step back. So if I think about a 3-phase approach, right? The first phase is your domestic travel. This is people within your country, and where you have enough population like Germany, Russia, the US, Saudi, obviously with 32 million people, you've got scale to attract your domestic travel. Second, you need to start working on your planning for your regional travel and then your international travel.
Right.
So in order for us to communicate to travelers, it sometimes takes up to 3 months to get people to book. So I'm not saying start to action today to tell them to come today, but you need to be front of mind. It's going to be a very competitive environment once all these travel ports start to open, right? Every destination we've seen now, Japan is willing to pay for a part of the travel for domestic travel. We've seen Sicily go out and say, we'll pay half of your trip if you come to Sicily, right?
Okay.
And we're going to see a lot more of this competitive environment. Who's going to be out there trying to bring visitors as soon as the skies are open?
Okay, thanks, Hatem. Bernard, can I come to you then? Gerald raised the point that you're obviously not going to be redesigning aircraft imminently anyway for changed circumstances. The question of physical distancing on flights is a very practical issue. A GEBTA, a Global Business Travel Association survey, suggested 60% of corporate travellers would like to have the middle seat empty on flights they're on. But from the point of view of the economics of flying, this is it might be possible when load factors are low early on, but it's not going to be sustainable, is it?
No, it's not. And various industry leaders have come out essentially against the idea of leaving the center seat open because it's not going to be economically feasible for the airlines. And of course, we're in the job of helping the airlines be viable businesses, aren't we? But let me go back a little bit. For years now, we've all known that air travel is the safest mode of travel on Earth. And that was regarding basically accidents and safety. But I want to point out that that also now extends to the physical air inside an airplane cabin. And I think that part of the effort and part of the initiative that Boeing is involved in, for example, with our initiative that I mentioned a little while ago, Confident Travel Initiative, not only are there the technical aspects of how you disinfect an airplane cabin, but there's also the communications aspects of it. Most people don't know, for example, that a modern Boeing airplane, let's say an airplane built within the last 20 to 25 years, is protected with HEPA filters. These are high-efficiency particulate air filters that literally filter out 99.9% of microbes, viruses, bacteria, other things in the air. And the air on that airplane is replaced about every 3 minutes. And the air does not flow from front to back or back to front. The air actually flows in a modern airplane from above the bins down and out by the passenger's feet. These are done in zones on an airplane, covering about 7 or 8 rows per zone. And it is literally one of the most safe environments that you can be in, not only from the safety standpoint, but also from the viral or disease standpoint. Except I would say that the general public just doesn't understand that. So part of our initiative, and I think part of what we're trying to do globally, is to help people understand the realities that already exist in an airplane cabin. It's a very actually safe place to be right now. And so, please.
Sorry, no, go on.
No, it's so there's a two-part piece. There's the technical part, improving sanitation, and there's lots of things we're looking at to do that. There are UV light, UV radiation systems that could be applied to cleansing high-touch surfaces and whatnot that we're looking at. But there's also the just getting the word out about how clean the air is already on an airplane.
Sure.
It's the air quality on an airplane, I should point out, is akin to that of a hospital or a clean room in an industrial plant. That's how clean the air is on your average jetliner. But people don't know that.
I'm interested in how the industry will communicate this, how safe it is in this respect, flying. I mean, clearly airlines have a fantastic reputation most of the time for safety. But it's a difficult message, isn't it? Because what the industry doesn't want to do is say there's someone sitting next to you in the middle seat because it's not economically viable for us to leave it empty. It wants to say you don't need to worry about somebody sitting next to you in the middle seat because of all this. So, but that's quite a difficult message to get across pithily.
Yes, it's a communications challenge, and that's why we believe we need an industry standard and an industry-wide effort to communicate this to the flying public globally. Not just in Europe, not just in the United States, but globally, and to work together on this because we are all in this thing together.
Okay, and there's and then I'll bring you in after this, Talib. Bernard, there are measures proposed that are clearly significantly important to protecting people, and there are those that are more to do with perception. So, for example, temperature screening at airports has been introduced at some airports, particularly in the Middle East. Heathrow is trialling it in London. But the evidence from EASA and other bodies is that actually temperature screening at airports, 75% of passengers who have the virus would not show up from temperature screening anyway. So it's pointless, other than possibly deterring some travellers who are ill from travelling and conveying a feeling of safety. Is that we've talked about transparency and the need to be open and honest with people. Would it be better to have temperature screening, even though it's not really contributing, or would it be better to say it's pointless temperature screening, so we're not going to do it?
Well, we are not a medical company. We build airplanes. But what we're trying to do is develop a consensus among all parties in the industry. And by the way, we are also in touch with epidemiologists and scientists on this matter. We want a consensus from all of them as to what is the right thing to do. You're talking about the airport experience, and you're talking about perhaps boarding the aircraft as well, temperature screening and whatnot. It's not really for us to say what is the right thing to do. That's for the experts, the epidemiologists and scientists and others. And of course, the regulatory agencies, which ultimately at the end of the day regulate how we do this. What we want is an industry discussion and a set of common standards, just like were created after 9/11. Let's have that same sort of effort and same sort of standards for this challenge, just like we did 20 years ago with 9/11. And I think if we achieve that, all these smaller questions like, do we need temperature testing? Do we need to wear masks? Blah, blah, blah. That will all be solved once we get consensus from a concerted effort with all parties involved.
Okay, very good. I failed miserably in my role as moderator because I haven't mentioned the poll that you've been able to see from the start, asking which of a number of issues you consider most important if you are to travel internationally in the next 12 months. There's about 15 minutes left to respond to that poll, and I'll share the results with you at the end. So if you haven't taken part in that poll, please do so now. Talib, can I come back to you? We've talked about certification. The WTTC has launched its Safe Travels certification. I know the UNWTO is supporting that. There's the Bureau Veritas system that I think has been taken up with Accor and a lot of the big hotel groups now. The GBTA in the US and the American Hotel and Lodging Association are doing Safe Stay certification. Then governments are doing their own certification. Portugal has Clean and Safe. So there are going to be there's a multiple of certifications and badges and flags and logos that people are going to see. Isn't that going to be confusing? Or do you think that the industry and governments can come together around safe travel, safe stay?
Very, very confusing. You're absolutely right here. But I think we should distinguish between two things. Setting a protocol is one thing, and certifying that protocol is another thing. Setting the protocols is going to be an issue that each government would have to deal with it on its own. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of this corona issue is that there is no trust in the international system. So even UN organizations, EU, Arab League, African Union, all of these, we don't hear their voices now. And I think what I'm saying here is that it's down now to each government by government. Each government is taking things in its own hands. So that's an important thing to notice now. People are listening to their governments now, not to anybody else. We need to rebuild our international system from bottom up. The international system that exists now is not taking any active part. People don't trust it anymore. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but IATA and ICAO, for example, are getting together now to try to do some protocols. I hope they succeed. But my guess is that it will not be sold unless governments buy it. It's in the hands of governments now. And even when we talk about the issues of demonstrations in the United States now, or other gatherings, this is anti-government. It's not anti-corona. It's not rebelling against corona. It's the governments that take things into their own hands now. Unfortunately, it's my belief. Now, I just want to go back to what Bernard said, please, because it's very, very important. I think, Bernard, what you said about the air quality in an aircraft is very, very important. This must be communicated in a simple way. And I think what you described to us is very simple. Simple way. We should go to companies that know how to communicate with people in a very simple way. Explain that to them. Because nobody's going to leave their home now, let alone travel. Travel for what? For leisure. Now there are different ways of travel, different means of travel. If you travel because you have to travel, you can take some risk. But if you travel just for leisure, you're not going to take any risk. You're not going to go into an aeroplane, closed place where everybody feels and thinks that it's a contaminated environment. I think what you said is very, very important. I didn't know about it, let alone other people. So you must communicate this. It's absolutely crucial and important to do that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Gerald, can I ask you, do you agree that it's the decisions, the key decisions are going to lie with governments really, at least in the short term, as Taleb suggests?
Well, I do, but I think that we have a great responsibility, particularly within the industry, like the WTTC, yes. IATA, the UN WTO. We've got to show that we are representing the voice of the people from within the industry and the voice of our customers from within the industry. And of course, we should continue. I think I know more about what the WTTC has been doing in recent times, which I think has been extremely effective. They've worked very closely with the G20 tourism ministers. And this year, as we know, Saudi Arabia is the chair of the G20, and they're intending to have their annual G20 in November in Saudi Arabia, hopefully. But I would also like to address an issue that I think that people actually want to travel now. It's not just in 6 months' time. It's not just in a year's time. We see already Michael O'Leary says in Ryanair, I'm going to fly 1,000 flights every day from the 1st of July or so. Well, then, how is he going to fill them? How do we facilitate that happening? And this goes back to what's been alluded to by so many of my colleagues here, talking about the corridors, the safe corridors. And I think, again, we need to be pressurizing governments to say, for example, look at this country, the United Arab Emirates, has probably one of the lowest infection rates, certainly one of the very low death rates, thank goodness, and has been very effective in its control of the virus. In fact, over 2 million people out of less than 10 million population have already been tested, which is, I think, the highest in the world. Well, why don't we look at something like Greece, for example, has also been effective and has announced that they're opening up. Why can't we have country-to-country agreements in terms of traveling like this? Haitham spoke very correctly about the terrible situation that we have in trying to keep our employees engaged in the industry. And you mentioned, Haitham, about the cost of rehiring is far greater in certain respects than the cost of maintaining. But having said that, and if there's an opportunity in the immediate months coming up, let's try to grasp it. Let's try to see what do we need to do to allow it to happen. for example, domestic travel is going to be a huge opportunity for travel and tourism to keep people employed, both within Europe, within the UK. I would very much hope to see Schengen coming back to something that represented what Schengen looked like, so they could travel internally within Europe, as they are opening up in their countries, even the badly affected countries like Italy and Spain. And, this is something that has to continue opening up safe corridors, understanding there's opportunity for domestic travel and even for a certain amount of limited international travel in the immediate term. That will then help us to keep our employees engaged in the industry. I think it's really important that we look at the here and now rather than just, we also have to look, of course, long term, but it is very important to get something done now to try to facilitate proper, safe travel.
The impotence of the EU through the crisis would be the subject of in relation to.
And now, Ian, you Brits are always blaming the EU. What is the situation in Britain at the moment? We don't have quarantine, but however, after the 7th of June, we will have quarantine, and yet there are 15 to 20,000 people arriving every day in the country. Don't blame the EU. Blame your own country. I'm not blaming
the EU. I was just about to say the impotence of the EU in face of member states through the crisis would be the subject of a discussion on its own. But then the federal government of the United States hasn't always been in accord with the individual state governments, has it, around the US? So
it's not just the EU, Ian.
Yeah.
No, it's not just the even the whole international regional system is questioned now, unfortunately.
Yeah. On a positive note, I'm convinced the UK quarantine will barely exist by the end of June. So I
agree.
Emerge with the rest of Europe.
Because that's the worst thing that can happen. Nobody's going to travel as long as they've got it.
Can I ask all of you a response to this question, although you don't all need to respond if one or two of you do. Questions come in from Abdul Rahman Hesham. How can airlines, hotels, attractions balance the highest levels of safety for their customers while keeping costs acceptable for travellers? Obviously, that's a huge question, that not just a small, short answer to that, but the costs are going to be a big thing, with businesses saddled with considerably more debt than they might have had before this, coming out of this. Item.
I go back to the discussion we had earlier about the implications and ramifications of 9/11. So post 9/11, we not only saw screening at the airport, but every hotel had to invest in barricades before you enter. You had to have additional security. You had to also have, the screening of luggage and people as they entered hotel lobbies. And we see the same thing happening now with COVID, as hotels will be required to invest in fogging tunnels. They'll also be required to invest in additional sanitization programs or sanitization products and facilities and training for the employees. Yes, this is going to be an additional cost. It's the same goes, when we talked about airlines and the whether it's a misconception or hypotheses of airline costs becoming more expensive, or airline tickets becoming more expensive. So travel becomes a luxury again. Back in the old days, not everybody could travel. It was a luxury. And so was staying in hotels. So travel and hotels have become a commodity for everybody to afford. And I believe today there will be cost implications for attractions, for hotels. And that is certainly going to be impacting the bottom line. Now, there's two things we see today. We see hotels who are opening up for the domestic market at quite low rates, which is not sustainable in the long run. And they will realize that very quickly. And I'm sure their sales strategy is going to have to react to that as they see more costs coming in versus their sales. And I think this is really a critical period where hotels need to think hard, and I think attractions and destinations need to think hard of how do they really balance the cost implications versus their sales, because it's no longer going to be a volume game. I think, it was the battle for numbers. Everybody had to be the big volumes, huge games. Recent studies show there will be a huge decline in group travel. There's going to be a huge rise in solo travel. There's going to be a huge rise in couples traveling together, small families, and small groups within people you know. And obviously, I do certainly believe people will pay more for experiences that are unique, that are new, and that are going to offer them safe journey.
Okay, I'm interested to know if other people agree with Haitham on that. Yeah, Gerald.
Well, as a hotelier, all I would say, and Haitham is a hotelier as well, so he knows the game. And you have budget hotels; they're not going to go away. They're still going to try to attract their market to their hotels. Will there be extra cost? And you've outlined it very well, Haitham. Yes, of course there will be. But hey, if I'm looking at the next 4 months' budget that I've got, and I can see that I can maybe break even, rather than the alternative, close down, make my employees redundant, and then, inshallah, as we say here, bring them all back in 6 months' time or 8 months' time and pay even more. I'll work on the basis of, even if I break even and I'm not doing too badly in the short term, I will still I'd take on the extra cost of safety that we're talking about in order to ensure that I keep my market base and that I don't lose that altogether. Because I feel that we have a responsibility within the industry. Sorry, I'm not contradicting you, Haitham, because usually we agree with everything with each other. But I do believe that people at all levels have benefited so gratefully from travel over the last 30, 40 years, and that people at different levels of affordability, we should still be able to afford to travel. That's why I like Ryanair, EasyJet, all of these. They've opened up travel for everybody. And I think within the industry, from the hotel point of view, we've got to try to keep it open for everybody. But we've got to realize breaking even in the short term is better than losing a lot of money by sending staff home.
Yeah,
completely.
Gerald, Michael O'Leary at Ryanair he said he expects there to be a torrid pricing environment really through till the end of next year. If others of you want to respond to that, please do. But I've got a second question I want to ask you here from Laura in Jamaica, which is about how do we balance the needs to address the climate crisis with the need to address the health crisis associated with COVID-19. Can they both be managed effectively, or will the need to address health and safety mean environmental concerns take a back seat? Talib, maybe you'd like to respond.
Thank you so much. I think, unfortunately, this is going to be the case. Now, in regard to aviation has been doing a good job with regard to the environment. A job that's also, stories not told again, Bernard. I think, again, the aviation industry, especially aircrafts and the making of the aircraft, should be more active in informing people what they're doing. There is less ignition now coming out of aeroplanes and coming out of any other means of transportation in the air. But nobody knows that. So I believe that this is something that could be discussed at a later stage. However, now, unfortunately, people are not talking about climate. They're not talking about the environment. They're talking about their own health. That comes as a priority. It's a fact. I know people don't like to hear what I'm saying, but it's a fact. Now, having said this, I believe there's an opportunity now in every crisis. The opportunity is to rebuild our industry now. We're rebuilding our travel and tourism industry just like we're rebuilding our own altogether. In this rebuilding, we will have to consider the environment, but not now to put it as a trump card in front of everybody. I believe that now the priorities are different in the minds and the hearts of people. Of course, we cannot forget about the future, but not now. Now is not the issue. Thank you.
I'm interested to know if people agree, but also, Bernard, a specific question on this for you, because the new models of aircraft, such as the 737 MAX and so on, are hugely more fuel efficient. But airlines are going to be saddled with debt. So in some cases, government involvement and so on, huge amounts of money to repay. They would hope sooner rather than later, so that we've already seen aircraft deliveries deferred and so on. Isn't this going to set back the taking up in larger numbers the kind of aircraft, the lower emission aircraft and so on? It will surely have a knock-on effect, this, for some years.
Ian, I think we're seeing exactly the opposite of that. First of all, by the way, the aviation industry has adopted on its own some fairly stringent
That's right.
emission control protocols out to the year 2050. And I won't go into all the details of those right now, but they're quite stringent. And I don't see that what's happening right now is going to kick those off the rails. In fact, what you're seeing going on with airlines right now is they are retiring early a number of their older aircraft that aren't as efficient as what's coming off our production lines right now. And so since they're going to operate a number of airplanes for the next couple of years, they're going to operate the more modern ones and retire the older ones. And so what does that mean? That means that we're going to move the older, less efficient, more emission generating aircraft off of the scene faster than we otherwise were going to do in accordance with our emission control systems. So I think if anything, we're actually going to enhance the emission protocols of the aviation industry. Now, that's not to say the rest of what makes this planet green or not. I mean, I can't speak to the automotive industry and others, but I don't think we're going to see our kicking ourselves off the rails on emissions in the aviation industry. If anything, just the opposite.
Okay. And Bernard, you've got one piece of good news at Boeing, haven't you? One piece of positive news is that the production of the 737 MAX resumed last week.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I want to move to a different area, which is because perception of safety is as important as or almost as important as the reality of safety, of course. And I wonder how businesses are going to cope with the potential media scrutiny if things go wrong, or travelers are unhappy about crowding at an airport or something. So I wonder how the industry and its participants are going to deal with that, and if there are any lessons to take from the scrutiny that cruise companies came under through the first weeks of the crisis, when they were trapped in the media spotlight because of passengers caught on cruise ships and unable to disembark and so on. Maybe Gerald, have you got any views on that?
I was going to say, if you're in the U.S. Navy and don't fire the captain of your ship when your crew get
That's very true. Very true.
Didn't work very well. No, look, we all deal with the media all of the time, and the media is something we court the media. We're always talking to the media when we want publicity. But I think going back to the earlier points that have been made, particularly as I was saying earlier myself, the Bureau Veritas safeguard, which the Jumeirah company has brought in, and all the other companies like Marriott and Intercontinental, that when you can refer to an independent body, an independent organization that has certified your hotel, for example, or your plane or whatever to be safe. I think it is important to bring in outsiders and to have independent assessment of just how good you are otherwise. But whatever happens, I keep saying it, but people are pent up with their frustration of being locked up. They want to get on the beach. And people, I see more and more, and it must be a huge concern to governments, more and more people are prepared to take risks, which is a major problem.
Okay. Does anybody else want to come in on this?
Yes, please.
Tell us.
Okay. What I want to say here is that, people are going to trust traveling on airplanes, but we can't keep saying that there is no 100% safety anywhere. It's a risk management game. So it's important to use our terms very carefully. We can't say safe zone, we cannot say safe airplane, but we can communicate a feeling, a perception of maximum safety. I'm doing my best. I mean, what anybody should feel for going on an airplane is that the people that are operating this airplane are doing their best. The manufacturers have done their best. The operators have done their best. That's what we need to do.
Okay,
That's a communication challenge.
Taleb, that makes rational sense, but it also conflicts with the message, the short, sharp marketing type messages the industry needs to give, and in its certification, the logos we talked about. So safe travels, safe stay, say exactly that, don't they? It's safe to stay here.
No, I don't think it's important. I don't think it's wise to use the term safe altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
We should use the term resilience, maybe, or something like that.
Certified.
Yeah. Certification is not about guaranteeing anything other than you're abiding by a certain protocol. Protocol doesn't guarantee you 100% safety.
Okay.
Certification, yes. I think we have to be very clear about this.
Gerald, Titan, you want to come in, and then Gerald.
Yeah, because this resonates with what Dr. Taleb has just said, and I'm a little biased to, the certifications that, of course, Gerald alluded to. I think whilst these are good, but we don't want to get involved with what these certifications actually deliver, considering the fact there's a lot of it is remote or self audits. That really is going to be, again, another perception that we need to manage in the future. So we can't, as Dr. Taleb was saying, we can't necessarily take these certification bodies, whether it's a stamp or whether it's a certificate, to say you are safe simply by signing an agreement with an organization that does give you a certification based on your own self audit or a remote audit. No. And it's impossible for any of these bodies to be able to physically audit or police the industry globally. It's impossible. The industry is huge. The globe is huge. There's no way that one body can do this. So I think managing perceptions needs to come from within the private sector. We talked about the government's role, but I think the private sector has a really key role to play here in order to stand out in front of consumers and showcase what they can do to demonstrate safety.
Yeah, so presumably it needs to be presented, the certification needs to be presented not as an audit, but as we follow the safe travels protocols.
Correct.
Gerald.
Yeah, you could call it the code of practice, for example, laid down by these various organizations, and that it has been applied. I looked in detail to see the background to what exactly applies. Sorry to keep mentioning it, with the Bureau Veritas safeguard. And, it goes right down to the pillows on the beds, the complete protocols, the safety protocols that will be decided by local authorities and governments anyway, but also gives the extra assurance to the guest. Can I just say quickly something about sustainability, if you don't mind?
Yeah, 30 seconds, Gerald.
30 seconds, no problem. I think the sustainability issue is absolutely vital, that now as we relaunch, we bring the environmentalists with us. So what can we do? One of the areas that we can surely show, and we've been very good at it, here is the good that comes out of travel and tourism. Here is what Taleb always says, travel and tourism is a force for good. Look what it does for the preservation of wildlife in Africa. We see poaching on the rise now because the people don't have any money there. Look what it does to give money directly into poorer communities in developing countries by giving cash injections into these villages. And I think we need to work very, very well with people like the WTTC, the UNWTO, in really getting the message across. I would actually love to get a documentary done with David Attenborough saying, look, this is the good of tourism. I'm not saying we ignore the problems, but at the same time, we need to show the good that we do in the world as an industry.
Okay, I've got to cut you off there, Taleb. One second. We've got 2 minutes left. So okay. I'm going to quickly tell you the poll results, and it's interesting.
Please.
100, I don't know how many people took part, but I assume it's quite a few. 100% of people would require assurance they would not face self-isolation in order to travel. 78% will look at the infection rate in the destination. 59% are concerned about the health and safety measures at airports and on flights. Only 5% want assurance on distancing from other passengers on flights. 25% will not consider travelling for at least a year. So 75% will. And 1 in 5, just under 1 in 5, 17% would want to know they're going to get a full refund in the event of cancellation. Now, we've got 1 minute left, so your answers are going to have to be 10, 15-second answers. And can you answer one of these? Either what most concerns you, Or what would you most like to see? One thing. Taleb.
I would like to see governments now working together bilaterally in a serious way so that we could start rebuilding the international system again from bottom up.
Thank you, Gerald.
I would like to see safe corridors and bubbles country to country on a bilateral basis just to help us get kick-started.
Lovely. Haitham?
I'd like to see destinations collaborating together in building their plans to attract visitors again.
Bernard?
I'd like to see Boeing airplanes flying at 100% occupancy around the world as soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Taleb, Gerald, Haitham, Bernard, you've been a great panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Bye. See you.
See you.